Bigfoot, skunk ape, grassman, Sasquatch. Just a few of the names given to the primate-like creature said to roam the woods and remote areas of North America. Tales of this elusive being go back for hundreds of years. Is it mere myth and legend? Or is there truly something more tangible to this phenomena? Join us on this journey as we discuss the science behind the encounters, the research, and the evidence, keeping you updated on the latest findings, ideas, and hypotheses. Arrogance gets us nowhere, and closing one's eyes doesn't make things disappear, nor less real. Today's myth could be tomorrow's reality. It's time to make this subject matter less taboo. Welcome to Monster X Radio. Bigfoot without the BS.
All right, welcome to Monster X Radio. This is Gunnar Monson, along with Mr. Shane Hardcore Corson. Today we're going to talk a little bit about all the plethora of Bigfoot documentaries and TV series and movies, etc. I had a little bit of extra time in the last couple weeks and kind of binge watched quite a few documentaries. I found some good ones. I got to say, I'm a fan of Seth Breedlove and Small Town Monsters. I watched a couple of those, but I was going through Amazon Prime, and there's tons. I mean, absolutely tons. I went back and watched a couple from a few years ago. The first documentary I ended up watching was Big Fur, which isn't so much about being out in the field, though. Ken Walker, who is the featured subject of the film, does research Bigfoot, does go out and do some field research. But the main subject there was that he was recreating a life-size model of Patty to enter the competition as a taxidermist. I really liked Big Fur. Ken's a character, and it was funny. You got to see a little bit back into his personal life, and it was enjoyable. It wasn't so much, a Bigfoot out in the field research documentary. I liked it. Now, I know that you just interviewed Ken a little bit ago, Shane, for one of our podcasts, and what was he like talking to him as opposed to, is that him in Big Fur?
Yeah, I interviewed Ken Walker years ago. I think it was like maybe 2013 or 2014 on Monster X, years ago, basically about his research. And for those that don't know Ken Walker, he's been a kind of an avid Sasquatch investigator for years up in Canada. And he was an individual who had worked with Todd Standing in the early days. Now, Ken Walker, amazing fella. He's hilarious. What you see on Big Fur is what you get in person, no doubt about it. And go back and listen to that episode of Monster X Radio with Ken Walker and his producer. It's just a couple weeks back. Good episode. But Ken Walker's a great guy, and he does a ton of really good investigative study stuff. And then, of course, he's a taxidermist, and he's built one of the most phenomenal, Sasquatch replicas out there, bar none. Big Fur is a great film, so check it out.
Yeah, it was entertaining. And he was a Roy Orbison impersonator professionally for a little bit. So,
yeah, and he's got a great voice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So we talked a little bit about that, Ken's interaction with Standing. And there was conversation a while back about a research area that somebody had taken Mr. Standing to, and then Mr. Standing had basically taken it over. That was actually Ken's research area.
Yeah, that whole area was kind of Ken's area, and like I said, maybe we can. We'll have to find the link. It's been many years since I've interviewed Ken, and forgive me, Gunnar, you may have been involved with that conversation. I don't remember. It's been many years, but we did interview Ken.
That was pre-Gunnar.
Okay,
PG,
pre-Gunnar, right? Well, we did. Monstrex did interview Ken Walker, and he really divulged a lot of really interesting things. That's back in the heyday where Todd Standing was kind of a big thing and all over the place. And I have met Todd Standing in person at the Sasquatch Summit years ago that was held in Ocean Shores, Washington. And, I'm not going to talk ill foul of somebody, and I can care less about individuals and their research per se. As far as talking ill foul of them, but, Todd to me is just one of those guys that the way he treated Ken Walker was absolutely wrong, and it is what it is. And and Ken does a great job of not talking ill foul of anybody. And to his credit, upwards and onwards, move on. There's always that aspect to this research, and the sooner you mature in this field, the better off you'll be. And Ken has definitely done that over the years, and as a guy I highly respect.
Well, like I said, I enjoyed the documentary, and if I would recommend, I give it 2 hairy thumbs up.
Of course you do.
Maybe I need to shave. I'm not quite sure, but no, I mean I like that one. And some of the other ones I watched, had to watch a couple of the Small Town Monsters one. Seth is doing this series on Bigfoot, on the trail of Bigfoot, and started out with the legend, and then there was the search. And, featured Lauren Coleman, Bob and Kathy Strain, other people that are associated with the North American Wood Ape Conservancy. And I saw a couple familiar faces from the OP.
I would imagine you did. Yeah, I was going to say we worked with Seth Breedlove on a portion of his On the Trail of Bigfoot series. And, I've known Seth online for years, having worked with him actually in the field and a couple of, his producers and fellow cohorts. Been a great experience. And I got a lot of respect, as I said before in past shows, that I got a lot of respect for Seth and what he does. And of course, you probably saw a couple of familiar faces on the Trail of Bigfoot, which would have been Derek Randalls and myself. Yeah, good stuff. Seth just puts out some amazing stuff, some really good, solid stuff. And, if you're not into Sasquatch, he's been working on all sorts of different cryptids and some paranormal stuff. I know Seth's passion is the Sasquatch phenomena. I've had conversations with him on the phone. That is his passion. And, Seth's had a couple of experiences himself, as has some of his production crew. And so it's always a pleasure to work with Seth. And I always look forward to whatever he's putting out there, because, at the end of the day, I would work with not just me, but the OP. The OP really doesn't work with a whole lot of production companies. We've done some stuff here and there, but as you know, Gunnar, we turned down a lot of stuff over the years, and especially recently, it's like these guys are coming out of the woodwork, reaching out to not just the Olymp Project, but many other groups, many other individuals for material to film with them. A lot of times we don't jive; it doesn't fit, and most of us can care less about TV unless it really puts the subject matter in a good light and the research that's being done in a good light. Otherwise, there's no money to be made. It's just about TV time, and who cares about that?
Yeah, Seth does a great job. Like you said, I like his approach, but there's a very theatrical, well edited, well shot. Some of the shows that I watched one from 2018 called Bigfoot Encounters. And while the content in it was good, it was basically focused on Southern Bigfoot phenomenon. And Dr. Meldrum was featured in it, Brian Sons and Don McDonald of the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization, I think. I remember hearing about the Gulf Coast Research Organization years ago.
Yeah.
And kind of hadn't really paid much attention to it. But they're they were featured prominently in it. The only thing I didn't like is they used a kind of a hokey Bigfoot costume throughout the, like when Finding Bigfoot does shows a Bigfoot recreation or whatever, their animation, their CGI is really high end. It just was a reflection of the budget, that they got the Bigfoot costume that they can find online or rent or whatever, and showed that that was a little hokey. The information was interesting and talked about some of the differences between Bigfoot sightings, what comes out of the encounters in the Pacific Northwest versus out of the South, where, the Pacific Northwest Sasquatch, Bigfoot seem to be more docile, and they seem to be a little more angry. And it could, in the South, it could be, the humidity, the big mosquitoes. I don't know what it is, but having to live in a swamp. And I've heard that for years too, I don't know if it's a interbreeding population, smaller population, and there's more interbreeding, but they talk about there being more of a variation in the number of toes that they find in tracks, 3, 4, and 5 toes. And one of the explanations that they put forth for that was possibly inbreeding, the amount of inbreeding that was going on, which is possible. I mean, everything, throw it against the wall and see what happens.
Yeah, to talk about that real quick, you brought up an interesting point. Something I've been wanting to talk for quite a while now, especially on some of these shows. When it comes to the amount of toes, I had a good conversation with Dr. Meldrum years ago about some of these, even up in the Pacific Northwest, and it's rare to find a trackway, of just 3-toed or 4-toed tracks. Not that it can't happen, and not that, say, if Sasquatch is missing a toe or there's something else out there, not that excluding all that, but it's also a lot of these tracks are found in certain types of soil or certain types of terrain where, just like a bear track or a cougar track or even a human track, sometimes you're only going to see 3 to 4 toes. I mean, it's just that simple. A lot of times you don't get the context of a track or a trackway if there's a trackway to be found.
From a single.
Yeah, it could be just a single foot. And then, is it 3-toed, 4-toed, 5-toed? But a lot of these tracks, they're impartial. And when people come out and go, okay, well, here's a 3-toed track and it looks like a giant foot and it's got 3 toes or 4 toes. If there's
a giant sloth.
Right. But if there's a whole trackway a whole trackway in line, then you can probably say, yeah, that individual is got 3 toes, 4 toes, or whatever have you. But to say based off of 1 track or 2 tracks that individual has that many toes, I have a hard time buying that. And like I said, Dr. Meldrum showed me how even with Sasquatch tracks or humans, if you step on the side of your foot, like Gunnar, you're out and walking in the woods barefoot, just for example, and you don't land flat, you land like more on the side of your foot, and a couple of your toes come down. Yeah, you'll leave a trackway that's going to show like the side of your foot and 3 or 4 toes, but maybe not that 5th toe. And
yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah, if there's not a real good trackway, then how can you say the individual only had 3 toes or 4 toes? It's all about context and the terrain and documenting stuff properly. Because I found tracks before, and many others have, where it looks like, oh yeah, it's only got 3 toes or it's only got 4 toes, when in fact, whether it's a known animal or not, no, there's more toes to be found if you follow the trackway, if there is a trackway, or if you look at the terrain or how it was walking that terrain and moving around in that. So just a lot of these assumptions kind of bother me sometimes, and I'm no expert, don't get me wrong, but just looking at this logically, sometimes it can be explained away rather easily, and sometimes they can't.
You make a good point that I think it's Cliff that talks about, that a footprint is not a duplication of a foot. It's the damage that's done by the foot to the ground.
Right.
So Dr. Meldrum was featured in many of the documentaries that I watched, and the Bigfoot foot has a different morphology than a human foot, and it's very well suited to moving in uneven ground, over rocks and branches. What you would, a human walk through the woods with any speed, we'd break an ankle before too long, because our foot is very is very stable. It's made for walking on flat surfaces, and Dr. Meldon was talking about there was a discussion of the Patterson-Gimlin film, and one of the very distinguished features about the gait of Patty is the angle with which she raises her feet. And, very quickly when her foot makes contact with the ground, her heel is perpendicular to the ground. Her toes are still in contact with the ground. And that's why a lot of prints, the toes are embedded deeper than the heel, because the weight, as the Sasquatch foot makes contact with the ground, it's propelled. They actually lift the back of their foot up first and basically go off their toes. And so the degree of how high they lift their legs to motate versus what a human does, we barely lift our feet off the ground. And that's one very distinguishing feature in the Patterson-Gimlin film is Patty's feet come way up off the ground. And then there was quite a discussion about how the difficulty of walking through that kind of terrain in a suit, and then doing it in the natural manner which way the Patty walks. It just doesn't make sense that it was someone in a suit, without getting into all the lack of what the capabilities in 1967 were for costuming and on a low budget. It just it just doesn't make sense. And then supposedly the guy that said he was in the suit, Hieronymus, had one eye, said that he wore the suit. His eye was like 2 inches from the edge of the costume, and he walked like Patty walked and didn't trip.
But with the foot morphology, I mean, that's something I often think about is how many times has someone come across a ambiguous track or trackway and thought, oh, it's a bear or something, just based on only the front pad coming down and maybe not seeing the heel, because maybe the heel never touched the ground. How many times has that happened? And would you even notice that? So, you know what? Maybe there is Sasquatch out there with missing a toe, or maybe there's something else. I don't know.
Right. Today I shared a picture from the futon footprint that Cliff investigated and Chris Minier down here in Oregon, what it was, 2008, February 2018. And I was lamenting the fact that I actually had been emailed by the same person, and I couldn't get away at the time. And I, fortunately, the person also contacted Cliff, who got a hold of Chris, because that would have been a really missed opportunity because the weather got really bad after that. Chris had some difficulty finding the location, actually drove by the location. It was pretty close to where he lived, but he didn't know exactly till he actually talked to the witness and was able to find this futon with a couple of footprints on it. And then the weather got so bad that I think it was like another week before Cliff was able to get down there. It was an impressive, and it has such a cool imprint on this. I mean, what's the chances of that, somebody finding that? Because a little bit of rain, bad weather would have destroyed it. And Cliff has those in his museum. He actually has prints of those that he has, you can buy them. And like that, those are super cool. I think everybody, it's a great Christmas gift or birthday gift for people that, are into Bigfoot, because it's so cool.
What a cool
display of the toes.
Yeah. I mean, what a cool story.
Yeah.
You're talking, I think it was down there basically in the Springfield area of Oregon, the Eugene, Springfield area down there in Oregon. And somebody had pulled off the side of the road and, off the main highway down there I don't remember if it was off the 5 or whatnot, but it was off the highway and kind of a desolate area. And they found this futon on the side of the road. I forgot why they pulled over. They pulled over and they saw this futon and it was laying on the ground, and they saw this huge impression. And like you said, Gunnar, individual reached out to you, and they reached out to I probably contacted you first, I believe, but then eventually reached out to Cliff. And fortunately, one of Cliff's buddies happened to live not too far away and went out and investigated. And lo and behold, was this really unique, really cool impression on this futon. futon, we're basically talking about a mattress on the ground. Somebody had dumped on the side of the road, and something apparently had stepped on it, which, I mean, if you look at that impression, it's impressive. The toes are splayed. It's large. And if you go to Clip's website or visit the museum down there in Boring, Oregon, you can see this firsthand. And it's rather amazing. And the whole story behind it, how it was collected, how it was found. It's actually, it's one of those stories that almost never happens unless you know somebody. And it's just fortunate that it made its way to Cliff. Though I know you were reached out to, and I know we had talked about it because I was actually thinking about heading down there, but I forget what I was doing at the time. I wasn't able to do it. So,
yeah, it just was. Cliff was actually in Nebraska at a Bigfoot conference at the time. I went back and was reading he's got a great write-up on his website on cliffbarackman.com. So if you want to, and I put a link to it on our Facebook group. It's also, it's on our YouTube channel. It's in Instagram. So I was sharing it today. It was kind of cool. I was looking at it today and wow, that was 3 years ago. Kind of reminiscing some of I missed meeting Bobo for the longest time. When I was in the BFRO, Bobo and this was way, pre-finding Bigfoot. I just used to hear about Bobo. Oh yeah, guy, Bobo from California, and we were supposed to be at the same place, and something would come up that I couldn't make it, or he didn't make it. And I think the first time I ever met Bobo was at one of Todd Neese's Beachfoot events. I actually outbid Bobo for a bottle of Bigfoot wine.
What?
I know. But I had a good time meeting Bobo, and he's a fun guy. And, I hadn't met Cliff before he was on Finding Bigfoot. I actually met Cliff, for the first time through a hopsquatch, through Guy Edwards' event that he used to have in Portland. Miss hopsquatch, that was a lot of fun.
Oh man, hopsquatch was great. I mean, what year was that? I remember meeting Cliff for the first time. I think it was 2000. I believe it was 2012. I could be wrong, but it wasn't shortly thereafter.
I just come back from Sasquatch Summit up in Washington in Ocean Shores, and ran into Cliff at the next hopsquatch. Was like the next day after I got back. So he was very kind. Gave me our birthdays were really close together, and we were talking, and I said, yeah, I just had my birthday. And he and took me over to his car and gave me a couple of casts. And what a cool guy. So,
yeah.
That was my first impression of Cliff.
Like you said, Cliff's a cool guy. And so, Gunnar, getting back to these documentaries you've been watching, what else have you watched? There's a ton. Yeah. There's a ton, like you said, on Amazon Prime and a few others. I've been catching up, and this year I've noticed a lot of really good ones coming out. What else have you seen?
I watched the Unwanted Sasquatch with the director's cut that Darcy Weir had done previously last year to the Sasquatch Among Wildmen, which you were featured on. And Dr. Meldrum's in that. Our friend Thomas Steenberg from British Columbia, who is one of the hosts of On the Shoulders of Giants with Julie Wrench. And the late Bill Miller he and Thomas were really good friends. They were featured on it. Boy, that Bill Miller had like an encyclopedia brain of Bigfoot knowledge. It also had John Green and Grover Krantz on it. And it had a couple scenes I brought back memory from a long time ago. They used to have a show out in Portland on Channel 2 called Town Hall. And they would have different subjects, and they had a town hall about Bigfoot. And Dr. Grover Krantz was there, and it was funny because a gentleman brought up a very woo aspect about that, and this would have been 25, 30 years ago, was talking about how they were interdimensional. And wow, woo existed way back then. I mean, who knew? Who knew the woo? But
not,
it was.
But not to the extent it is today. But yeah, it was around.
No,
it was around.
No, there were people were giving them some eye rolls in the audience, and it was kind of funny. But
ouch.
Yeah, watching that was actually a really good one. And of course, Sasquatch Among Wildmen that you were featured in was also a really good one. The last one that I was watching, and not through it all the way, is called The Back 80, which is pretty cool, like interview style. And I want to say it's based in Ohio. So a lot of the documentaries that I'm seeing are basically interviews, stretched out into a documentary. That's one of the things that I also like about what Seth does with Small Town Monsters and the way that he puts his stories together, his documentaries together. It's way more, like you said, theatrical. It's in terms of the amount of scenery and he goes out into the field, interviews people in the context of doing outdoor investigations. I mean, he went out with Nawak, and there was a gentleman there that was out, and while they were there, and heard vocalizations, heard a tree knock. And that evening, I think they saw some eyes looking at them from a hillside. So it's a little bit more than your typical like interview style, that it's all just interview styles. There's some of them that are put together where I think people just pulled people aside at conferences and did a series of interviews and then turned it into, a full-length documentary, which those are cool too. I like to watch talking to witnesses and investigators. And what's crazy is I started scrolling through on Amazon Prime is where I started, and just how many. I mean, there's tons and tons of Bigfoot documentaries, and some of them look kind of funky. I started to read reviews to see, what show they even bought. Otherwise, you could probably be watching Bigfoot documentaries for the next year solid. Never leave the house.
Yeah.
I wish I'd known that at the beginning of the pandemic last year. I would have grown a big beard and just sat ate, microwave food and popcorn and watch Bigfoot documentaries. It's good stuff. I mean, there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of good ones coming out. There's a few stinkers, and of course there's always the things that come out on TV. Finding Bigfoot just had I don't want to call it reunion show, but had a new episode that they did. Of course, Expedition Bigfoot is on TV right now. And, going back, of course, one of my least favorite Bigfoot TV shows of all time was the Bigfoot Bounty, $10 million Bigfoot Bounty. Basically, finding Bigfoot meets, say, Survivor, because it wasn't as intense as Survivor. I'm actually a Survivor fan. But it was kind of taking Bigfoot research and turning it into a game show. So, it was entertaining. Like I said, I kind of a persnickety Bigfoot connoisseur of Bigfoot TV stuff. If I run it by Susan, she loved Bigfoot Bounty. So did Jake. They also Susan really likes Expedition Bigfoot. As far as entertainment, not bad TV shows. Not my cup of tea. So it's just personal preference. Just recently, William Shatner is doing a new show called The Unexplained. And our friend Todd Neese from Oregon, the American Primate Conservancy, he and Diane have that, hosted Beachfoot every year for umpteen years. And all around good guy, was featured on the most recent episode. And it's interesting to me, they're like, hey, William Shatner's doing something called The Unexplained, and Spock, Leonard Nimoy did, In Search Of years ago. So picking up the mantle of his friend. Of course, like we were talking off air, and you were saying, hey, two original sci-fi guys. Yeah, makes sense. I found myself, because I do have my own prejudices about the subject. On the Trail of Bigfoot, The Search, there was a portion of the show, the documentary, that was going into the woo side, paranormal side and UFO connection. And I find myself getting squirmish about having a hard time sitting still, oh, please. But in Seth's defense, really, he's a documentarian. He was showing that side because he talked to people it is in the subject. There are people, that believe that Bigfoot comes down out of UFOs, like, the Bigfoot moves between dimensions. I was friends with Matt Johnson for quite a while. Haven't been in touch with him for quite a while. He went on to, the king of Woo.
I was going to say, you mentioned, we got a lot of new listeners. You have to fill people in on who Matthew Johnson is. You're just throwing a name out there. Who is? You got to give a little, a little bit of a background.
Yeah, no. Well, Matt Johnson was a psychologist that had a Bigfoot sighting down by the Oregon Caves with his family. It was very documented and caught on because of his profession. I think that, hey, here's a psychologist who said he saw Bigfoot. And years went by. I actually went out with Matt down in Southern Oregon out of Grants Pass. There was a group called the SOB, Southern Oregon Bigfoot Society, which is kind of funny. Went out with him a couple times. There was some evidence presented. It wasn't Matt that did it at the time. There was somebody presented. Some scat had been found the previous time they were out. I knew that had been buried in the ground. And the next time I went down, one of the guys said, "Yeah, last time we found Bigfoot scat." Like, no, you don't know that. You just found a pile of poop. So I it isn't worth driving down here for this. So years go by, I don't see Matt. Ran into him at Beachfoot, the first Beachfoot I went to. Matt was a hardcore aper, as to coin for lack of a better term. And if you believed otherwise, you were an idiot. Yeah. Well, Matt, at some point between that time that I met him and I saw him a couple years later, had gone to the Woo side. He had an research area in Oregon called SOA, that he named SOA, Southern Oregon Habituation Area. I actually ended up going out to SOA and spending a couple nights out there. I did not experience anything that I could say was Bigfoot per se. Some indentations on the ground. He would put out food bowls. Did find an interesting fingerprint on the bowl, which we did pull off the bowl by using charcoal and tape. But it became a point of contention between Matt and I because he allegedly had contact with a law enforcement person who could do fingerprinting and would analyze it. Well, never did happen. And Matt, at the time, was trotting people out, taking them to the area, and then saying that people vetted his area. We had a conversation. It was kind of heated about, like, if you're going to, tell people that I vetted your area, then you have an obligation to vet the evidence that was collected during that time. And like, well, I don't know anything to anybody. Anyway, things got weirder and weirder down there to the point of Adam Davis and John Carlton having a very bizarre, I think demonic encounter on the ridge down there out of Grants Pass. Subsequent to that, Matt went to the point of where they actually, he claimed that Bigfoot was from another planet, on a dying planet. They created some device, him and some other people, to save the Bigfoot from their dying planet, when they came to Earth or to this dimension, and then melded into trees. That Bigfoot were basically tree people. And interestingly, I hadn't heard a lot about Matt for quite a while, for a few years now. And Susan and I, for Valentine's Day, went up to Long Beach, Washington. And there's a curiosity shop, like a weird museum, but it's basically a giant gift store. And I'm walking through there, and there's a book about 3 inches thick by Matt about Zorth and the tree people and that whole thing. I did not buy it, and I won't read it. Yeah, that's Matt Johnson. So that's a long story, drawn out explanation of Matt Johnson.
You mentioned his name, and I thought, well, shoot, you went down that rabbit hole. You might as well give the audience a little bit.
I just want to defend Matt, not necessarily the results of his. Definitely not when he went so far out with his. So, he did go to the same research area for 8 years in a row, and I was giving him credit for that. And there very well could, in the area that he was in, there could have been Bigfoot there. Wasn't my experience that, Bigfoot. I did have a very strange experience where Matt claimed that Bigfoots were belly crawling up to the landing that we were on, and and that he saw light beings in the forest, and like I didn't see any of that. I determined that I just wasn't enlightened enough to experience those things. And then it's interesting, how sometimes I know other people that initially were apers that transition into the woo, attributing attributes to what I think is a unusual, highly intelligent, stealthy animal.
Yeah.
The vast majority of encounters are very terrestrial in their nature.
Wow. I mean, this show is kind of across the board because we're going from, documentaries to, the Matt J man. And honestly, Gunnar, I mean, you've worked with a lot of individuals and Matt J just happened to be one of them. Gunnar, I did want to touch upon something. Seth Breedlove's coming out from, Ohio with his production crew. Shannon LeGros is going to be.
This is exciting. So
it's exciting.
We've touched on this a little bit. We touched on this a little bit in a couple of passages, but it wasn't really public what the subject of this new. He's got two segments that he's done on the Trail of Bigfoot, the legend and the search, and there's a third one being planned. So tell our listeners, what is the subject matter of the third installment?
Absolutely. I'm really stoked because Seth's coming out here to work with the Olympic Project out here in the Pacific Northwest. And we're going to give him and his production crew access to a few areas that we've held very closely to ourselves as scientific endeavor. And they're going to get to film some of these areas. It's just access to this area that we've not given access to anybody. But Seth is an amazing videographer, producer, and he's got an amazing crew. We're going to give them access to some of these areas because I think there is a story to be told, and I think the story should be told. And I think some of the things we've come across should be shared. And this is where I'm excited, is that we're bringing these guys out there. And I know Seth is going to do a great job. The Olymp Project have no hesitations having Seth film this area. If something happens, cool. Maybe not. Who knows? Either way, all bets are off at any time.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we can run into a bear. I mean, there's a lot.
That'd be exciting.
Yes.
That'd be exciting in itself.
Oh, yeah. Exactly. And so that's, I'm really happy and stoked to have these guys out in this area to film with us and experience the remoteness, experience the density of the woods, the surrounding area, and just get a feel for the area. We've never allowed anybody out there, but I wouldn't do it, and we wouldn't do it for anybody else than Seth Breedlove, because he does amazing work in his productions. And it's something at the end of the day, hey, we're not going to prove Sasquatch exists on Seth's production, but we will share a story. We will share research. We will share findings. Who knows? I'm just looking forward to having Seth and Small Town Monsters out here again. And it's going to be something I'm going to be proud of. No doubt about it at the end of the day. And so is the rest of the Olymp Project group. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you touched on is so important with what Seth does differently. He is truly a documentarian. He's documenting what happens. He's not editorializing, like you say, he doesn't have an agenda. Would it be fantastic if Bigfoot, if the event that happened with you and Todd happened, well, Seth was out there, that would be fantastic for a documentary. Is it likely to happen? No, but there's good stuff there. I can't overemphasize the importance and the significance of what the OP has been studying for the last several years. But several years, and including what happened most recently, which we just covered in a 3-part interview with Todd Hale, and then David Ellis analyzing some of the audio stuff, that the nest site, and then subsequently Hugh and Todd, basically, I'll say it, you guys interrupted a Bigfoot making another nest. And I say that not just because there was a nest, but all the corroborating, the handprint, the footprints, the hair. It's something that it's happened again. It was a goal of you personally and the OP to replicate that original site. And what the heck? It happened. through due diligence. You couldn't have done it in a documentary. I mean, because it took too many years. I mean, it just took what happened.
It's
it took patience and.
Yeah, I mean, nobody right now is paying for this kind of work in this sort of documentary where somebody can be on your back or pay for your endeavors. And, Seth's going to tell a story here. He's going to do a great job. Like you said, Gunnar, I know the things we've experienced over the years, and I know the things we've looked at over the years, whether it's, mainly talking about the nest site study areas. I call it areas now because there's more than one, which is really cool. But we're also looking at other areas that may hold nests and getting a great involvement in this phenomena. So it's exciting stuff. And I'm just stoked that we got individuals like Seth Breedlove and Small Town Monsters willing to take their time and efforts to come out here and film somewhere where we're doing. It's exciting.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen Seth Small Town Monsters documentaries, go to their website, Small Town Monsters. Seth does a podcast of his own, and it's really good. And they talk about, a lot of different subjects. Obviously, our focus is on the subject of Bigfoot, but
isn't it called Monsteropolis? I think they're podcast, Monsteropolis, great podcast, and they cover a lot of different stuff, but very entertaining.
So check that out. And I know you you're getting ready for an event this weekend. I know that you're taking a trip back out with some individuals to the area around your most recent. Are you guys? I think you were still up in the air when I was talking to you about it last. Are you going to the new nest site? I mean, close proximity.
Yeah, I mean, this particular weekend, or excuse me, actually tomorrow I'm heading up to the Olympics to do some maintenance and preliminary scouting for a few things we got planned down the road here. And then I'm going to I'm actually in the Olympics still, but heading to, actually, we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to be working in the new nest area site and the old nest area site, doing some long-term audio work out there, which we've been working on, just getting everything, all of our, I's dotted and our T's crossed. So we're going to be working out there this upcoming Thursday through Sunday. Chris Spencer's going to join me. I think a few others are going to join me out there to do some audio work and audio work placement, trying to see what's going on in this area without our presence over a long period of time. We don't work this area every day or every week. We actually leave it alone for long periods of time, just to see if anything comes back or anything happens or we come across anything new. So I think that's important, imagine a hunter, and we're not hunters, but just imagine a hunter out in an area, placing game cameras every day, checking the game cameras and leaving a scent around and looking for his game. Yeah, you're probably going to scare off everything. So we like to leave these areas for weeks, if not months sometimes. And we go back periodically to review trail cameras or audio, long-term audio. Or if we don't have anything in this area, just to look for tracks, look for any new movement, both known animal and possibly the unknown, the target species. And so that's what we do. And this upcoming weekend, we're going to be out there doing the same thing, hiking our brains out.
So I'm hoping that you guys go out there and find that Bigfoot came back and finished building the nest.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, it ain't gonna. We're not gonna find it. We're not gonna find something finishing building the nest because I took most of that away. I have done in my collection, so that's not gonna
start from scratch.
Well, but
you pissed Bigfoot off.
It is. Yeah. It is such a vast area. This time of year, if nests are being made, it's the right time of year, and we'll look at some different areas, but very adjacent and very close proximity areas. I wouldn't be surprised if we come across something. Like I said before, many times on this show, I don't think Sasquatch makes nests yearly. I think it's specific for birthing purposes. Just my opinion, my hypothesis, and to come across a new nest,
I'm with you
It's
there.
very rare, but you never know. Because I don't know anything, just ideas. So who knows what we're going to come across and what we're going to discover. I'll be happy we find some really good impressions, knowing that something's still moving through the area. And maybe we'll come across something, worth riding home to mom and pops.
And something that has crossed my mind is like, okay, so you guys interrupted this nest building process, and it's for birthing. Let's just follow this. Stay with me for a second. And it was for a birthing purpose. They went somewhere else and made another nest. I mean, they wouldn't not continue their. I mean, if that's a process that they use for birthing, they went somewhere else after you interrupted them and built a nest. It would make sense that they would.
Well, see, that's the
they
thing.
Have another area close by.
Yeah, I mean, you would think so, right? You would think so, but once again, I don't. Right. I or we don't claim to know anything. You would assume that, but what if just just say it was a birthing process? What period in that individual's birthing process were they at? Were they about to give birth? Was it like a couple of days, a week? So if you disrupted the amount of work that we disrupted in that area that took place, would birth be imminent or maybe another week away? Who knows? Maybe they had to go give birth, or it had to go. Right. If just once again hypothesizing, it had to go give birth right away.
Maybe it was auntie. Yeah, it might be auntie that was building the nest. Might not be mom.
Well,
she's got a full belly.
Yeah, well, but get back to the nest real quick. With the the tracks found in there, they're 14 inches, roughly 14 inches long, and that it fits within Patty of 1967 film. It looked like she had either given birth or was about to. And of course, I've talked about the show before about nests found out in the area. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's such a rabbit hole of ideas, but we're building upon this. We're starting to predict where we're going to find these nests. And basically, we're starting to predict possibly when. Yeah, I mean, breaking one of these nests up, as something's building it, if it's for a birthing purpose, is maybe not something. Some people were like, "Oh yeah, you're a jerk for doing that," and other people are like, "No, you got to get the proof." I kind of fall in the middle. I'm like, there was a lot of work that went into gathering all that material, and I feel bad about it. And then I'm like, well, this is what you're out here for. So, I'll be honest with you, the chances of walking, I don't care if it's even a bear or whatever, just saying, for example, walking in on something, building something like that, pretty dang slim across the board. And we're not dealing with a bear. I'm just saying across the board, that's really rare. And so to break up something that's possibly building a nest to have birth or give birth, or for a nursery scenario, regardless of the species, that you gotta think about that. That took a lot of effort and time. I could recognize that, as could my cohorts. You could recognize the amount of time went into that, and you feel a little bit guilty about it. Absolutely. Yes, definitely. I think Sasquatch can go on and build another nest somewhere. And I hope that if that was the scenario, they did or it did. Who knows? I mean, who knows at the end of the day, the purposes of the nest, what they're made for. This is all conjecture. And I'm cool with that.
Yeah. The interesting thing is, though, their physicality, how much work was it for them versus what it would be for us?
Great point.
Yeah. I mean, breaking Huckleberry to them is probably no big deal. Where it is to us, we aren't able to snap Huckleberry in the diameter that they utilize for these nests.
I mean, great point. And there could be another nest 5 miles away. Who knows? I mean, this area is so vast. There's so many ravines. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's many more nests in this area, whether they're new or old, but trying to get through this area or these areas, it's a tall order. It's one of those things where you have to have an agenda and a goal.
Right. The original nest site is no picnic to get into. And it sounded from the description of where you and Derek went to and found the very old nest, what appeared to be older than the original nest site, was even kind of more dense and sketchy. And then this area is in close proximity to that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely.
It's no easy task just to go out there. Where the odds were almost nil that this would have ever happened. I mean, that someone, a Bigfoot researcher, would walk up on a Bigfoot building, and that the only thing is the amount of time that you have spent going out into that area, you increase exponentially the odds of something happening, and because of timing, you knew what time of year to go, so it wasn't quite the moving needle in the haystack. That's where you narrow things down to some degree of predictability. You know when the original nest site was discovered, that it was found close to when it had been built, and what you happened to be back out at the time when, and that was a year ago now, right? So I guess it is
actually, it was a year ago, a couple of days ago, to a T. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I'm still amazed. Todd Hale, who was out with me on that particular trip where he found this new nest in the making, we talked about this the other day. He was actually the one that said, hey, it was a year ago today we came across that, and I didn't realize that, knowing though it was the same month. It's just one of those things where, yeah, it's it's absolutely stunning. It's absolutely amazing. Regardless, like I said, people can argue what made the nest. I don't care about that. I'm more than confident what made these nests, but you can argue that point. To come across something in the making of one of them, it's so weird. If you knew this area and how we walked in on this area, such a vast area, and Todd Hale and I just happened to last minute, building our camp, and we're going to go check out this ravine real quick and then head back to camp, to come across something of that magnitude. And I mean, by magnitude, I mean, what we heard out there was huge, tremendously huge, moving around in the brush. And then to find what we, eventually found, to come across this nest pile and all the huckleberry breaks. It's like for me, and I know I speak for Todd Hale too, it's like winning the lottery. It's like something you'll never forget.
It's the Bigfoot lottery.
It is, other than, we did have a video going. We didn't capture it because this thing was just below our view in the huckleberry, which is so thick. But this is about as close to a victory for our personal research, upwards and onwards, to keep going. And maybe we'll come across even more this year. That's my goal. I mean, we're right in this time frame where I think, if Sasquatch, is making nests this time of year, or even if it's every 4, 5, 6 years, we should be able to come across more nests based on the area, based on what we're, our patterns, possibly a predictability. There's so many questions, but dang, this is exciting stuff.
When I heard about this, I was so excited for you because I knew that this was one of the reasons why you put so much time and effort into the area. And, hundreds of hours in the woods. And there had been some breakthroughs. There was a sighting near, that you and Cliff investigated and found some what looked like evidence behind some footprints and other sightings. And you found some other what looked like footprints.
Yeah.
And this is all taking place. It didn't happen in 2 weeks. It happened over the last 4 years. You've been going back and occasionally something of interest would happen, which is what kind of, I guess if you were plotting a bell curve of, frequency of some kind of evidence being found, if you go to an area that has Bigfoot in it, that it wouldn't be very frequent that you would have something happen. You would eventually. So this is a unusually down the rabbit hole kind of conversation, which Shane usually and I usually have when we're not recording a show.
Right.
All this stuff. So it's almost like you're sitting on a phone call with Shane and I that
exactly.
We have when we're not recording. So a lot of stream of consciousness kind of conversation. But
yeah, across the board.
I hope you've enjoyed it. Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. If you're listening on YouTube, give us a thumbs up if you like it. If you hated it or you like it, put in the comments. If you hated it, like I slept through it, give us a thumbs down. But if you enjoyed it and you want to hear more stuff like this, be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the notification button so that you actually get notified when we put up a new video. We're doing a lot of crazy stuff, new stuff, what Thomas Sewid doing his Sasquatch Island every week, and Thomas Steenberg and Julie doing On the Shoulders of Giants, which is a really cool ongoing series. And stream of consciousness, Bigfoot stuff. So if you, like you said, if you enjoy it, thanks. And we appreciate you sticking with us. So we're going to wrap this up. And Shane, we'll talk soon about what happened with your weekend. Hopefully something fantastic happens. Maybe you find that, the replacement nest somewhere, and or you find have another encounter, which would be fun.
You never know.
Gunnar, you never know. So for Shane Corson, this is Gunnar Monson with Monster X Radio. Thanks everybody for listening, and we'll be back soon. Keep it squatchy.
Thank you for joining Monster X Radio